My girlfriend called me embarrassing for speaking languages until clients praised my fluency. I thought she was joking when she laughed at me for speaking 3 languages at the party, until she didn't. It was a Saturday evening, the kind of night where the city lights glitter like cheap diamonds and everyone thinks they're effortlessly charming. I had just finished greeting the host dog in perfect Japanese, because, of course, the dog's name was Momo, and my brain decided it deserved a full-on formal introduction, and I swear I could see Samantha's eye twitch from across the room. For some context, I've always loved languages, always. English is obviously my first, but Spanish came in during middle school because my neighbor was from Madrid and refused to speak anything else to me. French snuck in around high school thanks to a YouTube obsession with Parisian street culture videos. And Japanese, well, Japanese came in because I was that one kid who spent 3 nights straight watching Studio Ghibli films, trying to sing along with the opening theme songs. Somewhere along the way, I became reasonably fluent, and somewhere along the way, I also became embarrassingly enthusiastic about it. Now, some people find that charming. Some people find it weird. Samantha, she found it embarrassing, publicly, often. "Why are you talking to a dog in Japanese?" she had asked, not even a hint of amusement in her voice, just pure incredulity, while I knelt down to Momo like a full-on anime protagonist. "I'm saying hello," I said, smiling at the tail-wagging fluffball. "In front of all these people." She gestured vaguely at the room full of cocktail-sipping adults. You're literally embarrassing yourself." I froze, halfway through bowing to Momo. I mean, who knew that greeting a dog could suddenly be a social faux pas? That was Samantha in a nutshell. Lovable, smart, occasionally stunning, but also she had this uncanny ability to suck the fun out of any situation where I dared to show off a skill. And speaking 3 languages in a single afternoon qualified as a skill. Take last week, for example. We were at a cafe, just a casual Sunday thing, when I spotted Carlos, my Spanish-speaking friend from college, sitting alone. Naturally, I waved and called out a cheerful, "Hola, amigo, ¿cómo estás?" Samantha's reaction was immediate. "Oh my God, are you seriously speaking Spanish in public? Can you not?" And not just, "Can you not?" No, it was the kind of tone that suggested she thought I'd just committed a crime against humanity. Carlos raised an eyebrow, clearly amused, and I gave him a sheepish smile while Samantha buried her face in her phone like I'd said something morally reprehensible. Then there was the French incident, dinner with her parents. I thought it would be cute to greet the waiter in French. "Bonsoir, monsieur," because, it's polite and French sounds fancy. Samantha leaned over, whispering, "Seriously? You don't have to do that. Stop showing off." And later, during dessert, she muttered under her breath, "You make everything so awkward." I won't even start on Japanese. I had this little ritual where I practiced Japanese phrases at home, reading aloud while brushing my teeth or making coffee. One morning, I said, "Ohayu gozaimasu," with perfect intonation, and she laughed so hard I thought she was going to choke on her toast. "You sound like a cartoon," she exclaimed, clutching her stomach. At first, I laughed along. I mean, who doesn't want their partner to laugh with them? But over time, it started to hurt. The humor faded when I realized that the laughter wasn't exactly at me, it was at me. And the casual, joking way she dismissed my skills in public made me wonder if I was actually weird, embarrassing even. I remember lying in bed one night, scrolling through my phone thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe people do think I'm over the top. My brain would conjure up all the scenarios, me bowing to Momo at a fancy party, greeting a client in Spanish by mistake, or practicing Japanese phrases in front of someone who doesn't understand them. Each imagined scenario ended with the same verdict, me cringing while Samantha rolled her eyes. And yet, I couldn't stop. Languages were part of who I was, like a muscle I had to keep flexing. Work was where my multilingualism became more than a personal quirk. I work in marketing at a mid-sized firm, the kind where clients range from local startups to international companies with CEOs who treat Zoom calls like royal audiences. And wouldn't you know it, the next big project involved a meeting with high-profile clients from Europe and Asia. One of them was French, another Japanese, and a couple from Spain. Basically, it was a perfect storm for someone like me. Or a disaster, depending on how Samantha's words had seeped into my confidence. I spent the week preparing, quietly, obsessively. Notes sprawled across my desk in 3 languages, pronunciation drills running on my laptop, polite phrases memorized for every imaginable scenario. Every time Samantha walked past my office space at home, she'd smirk. "What are you doing?" she asked one evening. "Preparing for a client meeting," I said. "Practicing French again?" she teased. "You're going to scare them with how weird you are." I tried to laugh it off. "Or maybe I'll impress them." Her eyebrow quirked. "That's skeptical, really?" Look, it was infuriating and motivating all at once. Then came Friday, the day of the meeting. I put on my best suit, polished my shoes, and rehearsed small talk in French, Spanish, and Japanese on the train ride there. My heart raced. Part of me was terrified I'd slip up and prove Samantha right in front of dozens of people who actually mattered professionally. Part of me wanted to prove her wrong. In a quiet, satisfying, you have no idea how important this is way. At the office, my team was buzzing with nerves. My manager, always the perfectionist, gave me a look that screamed, "Don't mess this up." And I nodded, gripping my notepad like it was a shield. Samantha, of course, had sent me a text that morning. Don't embarrass yourself. I stared at it, a mix of irritation and determination swelling inside me. I tried to focus, reminding myself this was my element. Languages weren't a gimmick, they were my edge. And deep down, I knew Samantha's teasing wasn't malicious, just misguided. Still, it stung. The meeting room was intimidating. Sleek glass walls, a long polished table, and chairs that looked like they belonged in a yacht. The clients arrived, introductions were made, and then came the moment. I opened with a friendly greeting in French for Monsieur Dubois, who looked pleasantly surprised. Next, I switched to Spanish for Senora Vega, who smiled broadly, nodding like we were old friends. Then, when a Japanese client asked a technical question, I answered in Japanese, carefully weaving in cultural references I had studied for days. Their reactions. It was like a switch flipped. Eyes widened, smiles appeared, polite laughter, genuine engagement. And me? I felt a surge of pride and adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. My confidence was returning in waves, washing away weeks of doubt. But still, in the back of my mind, Samantha's voice lingered. You're embarrassing. You're over the top. I pushed it down, reminding myself that impressing clients wasn't about anyone else's opinion. It was about showing my best self. After the meeting, back at my desk, I replayed everything in my head. The clients had complimented my fluency, my manager had given me a discreet thumbs up, and my colleagues looked impressed, maybe even a little jealous. And yet, the satisfaction was bittersweet because I knew Samantha would never fully understand this world. That night, I went home, expecting her to tease me as usual, and she did. So, you didn't embarrass yourself today? She said, a hint of amusement creeping into her tone. I smiled, the tension in my shoulders loosening. Maybe I didn't. She shrugged, and I could tell she was trying to hide a smirk. I wanted to tell her, it wasn't just that. I actually did something incredible today, something you wouldn't get yet, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I made a mental note. The next time she called me embarrassing, I would remember this moment. The moment where my quirks, the very things that made me feel self-conscious, became my strength. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. There would be more clients, more meetings, more opportunity days to shine. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone, even Samantha, make me feel small again. I went to bed that night, tired but buzzing, languages swirling in my head like old friends, reminding me that embarrassment was subjective, but excellence was universal. When the email popped up from the client in perfect Japanese, my heart skipped a beat. This was my moment. Or at least I hoped it would be. It was a normal Tuesday morning and I was scrolling through my inbox like I did every day, dodging spam offers and newsletters I never subscribed to. Then there it was. The subject line glared at me like a neon sign. Urgent. International client meeting, language-specific presentations required. I clicked and the body of the email was from our Japanese client. Polite but firm. They wanted a full presentation with introductions in Japanese, and they expected a nuanced understanding of their cultural context. I blinked, twice, then 3 times. My first thought, okay, this is it. This is what all those years of obsessive language learning were for. My second thought, immediately after, oh God, Samantha is going to laugh at me when she finds out I'm going to be up at 11 p.m. practicing honorifics and bowing techniques. Because, of course, Samantha had a way of making every personal skill I had seem like a joke. She was sweet, smart, funny, and charming in ways I could never quite replicate. But when it came to my language obsession, she was relentless. That night, back at our apartment, I opened my laptop and began drafting my plan for the week. Japanese greetings, French cultural references, Spanish small talk, even a few light German phrases I'd throw in as a wild card. Samantha walked in while I was reading out loud from my notes. Konnichiwa, ohayo gozaimasu, watashi wa. She paused in the doorway, arms crossed, raising an eyebrow. Are you seriously practicing Japanese again? You sound like a cartoon character who just escaped from anime land. I'm preparing for a client meeting, I said, keeping my voice calm, even though I was tempted to shout. This is important. Overly dramatic as always, she said, smirking. Do you need a little beret too? Maybe some baguettes for your French segment? I laughed, though inside a tiny pang of doubt crept in. She wasn't wrong, it was dramatic, but it was necessary. I couldn't just wing a meeting with international clients expecting me to smile politely and nod. These were professionals who knew their culture, their language, and their business. If I failed, I'd look unprepared, foolish, and, worst of all, she'd probably say, see? Told you it was embarrassing. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I started waking up earlier than usual, reciting phrases under my breath while making coffee. Ohayo gozaimasu, o genki desu ka. My phone was filled with recordings of native speakers, which I replayed obsessively, trying to match intonation and rhythm. In the living room, I had scattered little post-it notes with cultural tips, pronunciation notes, and polite phrases. Samantha wandered by, occasionally shaking her head, muttering, "You've turned the apartment into a language war zone." I was undeterred. This was bigger than embarrassment. This was my chance to shine, to prove that all those years of obsessive language practice weren't just hobbies. They were skills, potentially career-defining. Work wasn't helping my nerves either. The office was buzzing with chatter about the upcoming meeting. I could sense the subtle glances from colleagues, the ones who always thought I was a little too theatrical. My friend and coworker, Marcus, leaned over one afternoon. "Hey man, you really think you can pull this off? They're like top-tier clients. Not exactly your usual spreadsheet crowd." I smiled politely. "Yeah, I've got this." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You've got this with your languages, huh?" There was a hint of teasing there, a hint of doubt, and I felt a flicker of defensiveness, but I ignored it. I couldn't let anyone's skepticism derail me. Between work and preparation, I started to notice just how underestimated I had been all along. People would casually mention my quirky language habits or laugh when I use a phrase in Spanish at lunch, but none of them knew what I was capable of when it actually mattered. None of them knew I had spent hours memorizing the subtle differences in formal versus casual speech or studying the business etiquette in 3 different cultures. And now, finally, there was an opportunity to show it. One night, Samantha caught me mid-practice again. I was kneeling slightly, bowing while speaking Japanese phrases in the mirror. I wasn't even aware of how theatrical I looked until she let out a dramatic gasp. You're embarrassing," she laughed, clutching her stomach. "You sound like you're summoning spirits." I froze, holding my bow halfway. "It's, culturally appropriate?" "Culturally appropriate? You're in the kitchen. There's no client here, just the fridge and me." I laughed, a little forced, but I knew she didn't understand. I wanted to say, "You're going to see this isn't embarrassing. Not tonight. Not this week." Instead, I shrugged and muttered, "Guess I'll be talking to imaginary spirits tonight then." By the next morning, I was running through my multilingual presentation on the train. English opening lines, French icebreakers, Spanish small talk, and then Japanese formal introductions for the client. I could feel my confidence growing as I rehearsed, each phrase solidifying my readiness. Arriving at the office, I took a deep breath. The conference room was set up meticulously, projector ready, refreshments in place, nameplates arranged in exact alphabetical order. I walked past colleagues who glanced at me with curiosity and skepticism. Their expressions, a mix of, "Will he pull this off?" and, "Oh, here he goes again." I ignored them. This wasn't about proving them wrong. Not really. It was about proving myself right. When the clients arrived, my preparation paid off immediately. The French executive smiled warmly when I greeted him in flawless French. The Spanish partners leaned in when I sprinkled colloquial phrases in our discussion. And when the Japanese client raised a technical question, I answered with precise wording, subtly showing knowledge of their cultural etiquette. Their reactions, pleased nods, engaged expressions, genuine smiles, fueled me. Throughout, I kept glancing at my notes discreetly, adjusting pronunciation in real time, and managing the flow of conversation seamlessly. My mind raced, but in a good way. This wasn't panic. It was focus, adrenaline, excitement. Every phrase I spoke reaffirmed the countless hours I'd put into languages. Every compliment, every surprise glance felt like a silent rebuttal to years of being told I was embarrassing for loving languages. At one point, Samantha's teasing echoed in my mind, but I turned it into fuel. She thought it was weird. The world, at least this small corner of it, thought it was impressive. And I was determined to keep proving that. Silently, confidently. When the meeting wrapped up, handshakes were exchanged and the client's smiles felt almost tangible. I walked back to my desk, exhausted but buzzing, replaying each interaction in my head. My colleagues gave tentative nods. Marcus whispered, "Okay, maybe you did have this," and my manager gave a subtle thumbs up. I allowed myself a small private grin. The tension of the week, the nervous rehearsals, Samantha's teasing, my own self-doubt was easing. I was starting to realize that embarrassment was subjective. Skill, preparation, and confidence, those were objective, and tonight I had proven that. As I packed up my bag to head home, I felt that familiar mix of relief and anticipation. This was just the beginning. Opportunities like this were rare, but the more I embraced my multilingual skills, the more doors seemed to open. And while Samantha would undoubtedly tease me on the ride home, I knew that somewhere underneath her playful smirk, she was impressed. I just hadn't told her that yet, and for the first time in a long time I felt ready, not just to face my clients, but to face the world, my quirks, and even her teasing without flinching, because this was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anyone, even Samantha, make me feel small again. "I've never met anyone who speaks like this," the client said, and for the first time, I felt invisible walls crumble. I should probably start by saying that I've always had this weird relationship with languages. They were my secret joy, my hobby, my weird little obsession that made Samantha roll her eyes and laugh at me in public. But sitting there in the sleek, glass-walled conference room, hearing those words from someone whose opinion actually mattered, I realized it wasn't weird at all. It was power. The meeting had started with me greeting each client in their native language. Monsieur Dubois, the French executive, looked genuinely surprised and pleased when I launched into flawless French small talk. "Enchanté de vous rencontrer," I said, bowing slightly. Not theatrically, just respectfully. His eyes lit up in a way I didn't even know possible for a businessman. "Senora Vega from Spain," smiled broadly when I addressed her in Spanish, using casual yet polite phrasing she clearly appreciated. And the Japanese client, well, when I answered his technical question in perfectly measured Japanese, throwing in a subtle reference to a local cultural festival, I swear I could see him relax and lean back in his chair like a tension I didn't know existed had evaporated. For a moment, I let myself enjoy it. I mean, really enjoy it. The adrenaline from months of preparation and years of language practice collided with the thrill of genuine acknowledgement. I could feel my shoulders relax, my heart rate steady, and a smug little smile creeping onto my face. And then I remembered Samantha. God, Samantha, the one person who had, for years, called me embarrassing for speaking French to waiters, Japanese to the cat, or Spanish just for fun. I flashed back to that night at the party, the dog named Momo, the bowing, the laugh that wasn't exactly supportive, and I couldn't help but laugh softly to myself. In that moment, the contrast between her judgment and this recognition from people who actually mattered was so sharp it was almost hilarious. Almost. Of course, she would probably tease me mercilessly if she were here, saying something like, "Look at you, Mr. Multilingual Superstar, saving the day with honorifics." But it didn't matter. Not today. Today, the world validated what I had always quietly known. My languages weren't a quirk. They were a skill, a damn impressive one. Throughout the meeting, I switched seamlessly between English, French, Spanish, and Japanese, adjusting my tone, phrasing, and even body language to fit each client. I answered questions, made jokes in the appropriate cultural style, and used subtle idioms that only someone with genuine fluency would think to sprinkle in. I could feel my colleagues' eyes on me, some wide with admiration, some tight with envy. Marcus, my skeptical friend, was clearly trying not to look impressed. I caught him glancing at me as I navigated a tricky question from the French client about market trends. His eyebrows were furrowed, a mixture of disbelief and something I like to think was respect. My manager, usually stoic and exacting, gave me a slight nod that was basically the office equivalent of a standing ovation. And then came the praise. Not the polite, businesslike, good job kind of praise. No, this was the kind of praise that felt like someone had ripped down a veil I didn't even realize I was hiding behind. "Your fluency is remarkable," Monsieur Dubois said, leaning forward in his chair. "And your understanding of cultural nuances. I've never met anyone who speaks like this. You make international communication seamless." Seamless. That word hit me like a punch of pure satisfaction. I'd spent countless hours memorizing pronunciation, practicing etiquette, learning the subtle cues that most people would miss entirely. And here it was, not just acknowledged, but celebrated. Senora Vega chimed in next, smiling warmly. "You make speaking Spanish so natural. You have a real sense of people's comfort and tone. It's impressive." The Japanese client added a final note, nodding. "You show respect and understanding. It is rare to meet someone so precise and considerate in language and cultural context." I wanted to stand up, throw my hands in the air and shout, "Take that, Samantha!" But instead, I smiled modestly, thanked them, and continued the presentation. Because part of being professional is subtlety. Part of being respected is grace. But inside, I was quietly, smugly victorious. And that's when it hit me. I had underestimated the subtle envy in the room. Colleagues who had laughed at me, quietly, who had said things like, "He's just overdoing it with the languages," were now forced to watch someone they had dismissed excel in a domain they didn't even understand. It wasn't malicious, it was natural human reaction. But still, it was satisfying. Very satisfying. During a brief pause in the meeting, I couldn't help but let my mind wander back to all the moments Samantha had laughed at me. Practicing Japanese in the kitchen, French at the cafe, Spanish at lunch. Every single time, her voice had been a mixture of amusement and disbelief. And now it all seemed trivial. Almost absurd, actually. Because the same skills that had made her scoff at me were the skills that had just earned me a quiet standing ovation from high-level international clients. I realized in that moment that embarrassment is a funny thing. Often, it's not real. It's a reflection of someone else's perspective. And the people who dismiss your passions, their opinions don't define your worth. Skill does. Preparation does. Confidence does. And today, I had all three in spades. When the meeting wrapped up, handshakes were exchanged, and the clients offered thanks and compliments, I felt a wave of internal triumph wash over me. This wasn't just about work. It was about validation, about proof that the things I loved and nurtured, the things Samantha had laughed at, had real value. Walking back to my desk, I caught a few more subtle looks from colleagues. Some were impressed, some still skeptical, and a few clearly envious. Marcus, ever the skeptic, leaned in and whispered, Okay, you were right. That was impressive." I smiled. "Thanks," I said, though inside I was thinking, "You weren't the only one who doubted me, Marcus." That evening, I went home, exhausted but buzzing. Samantha was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I could tell she knew something had gone differently today. She tilted her head, squinting, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. "So, you didn't embarrass yourself today?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and something I couldn't quite place. Was it awe? Slight embarrassment? Maybe both. Nope, I said simply, setting my bag down. Not today. She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. She was impressed, whether she wanted to admit it or not. And for the first time, I realized that her teasing wasn't malicious. It was habitual, a reflex. But I also realized that my validation didn't need to come from her. It had come from people who mattered, from clients who appreciated skill, and from the undeniable proof of my own abilities. I sat back, thinking about the strange arc of life, the same quirks that had made me feel self-conscious. My obsessive love of languages, my tendency to over-prepare, my embarrassing enthusiasm had just become my superpower, and I didn't have to hide it anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I smiled. Not just at the memory of today, but at the realization that I was beginning to see myself differently. Confident, capable, and yes, maybe a little dramatic, but in ways that actually mattered. The invisible walls of doubt were starting to crumble, and the person I was, quirky, passionate, and multilingual, was finally starting to shine. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. She couldn't stop staring when the client called me a genius. Suddenly, the embarrassing guy was the hero. I'll admit it, I've always had this weird, half-guilty pleasure in languages. They were my private obsession, my little corner of the world where I could lose myself and feel competent. And yet, for years, Samantha had been the world's self-appointed critic of my embarrassing habits. French greetings to waiters, Spanish small talk with friends, Japanese practice in the kitchen. According to her, each of these things was an opportunity to cringe. And then came today. It was a networking conference hosted by our company with representatives from clients all over the globe. Think polished suits, name tags with impossibly small fonts, and enough handshakes to tire out a minor army. I walked in, quietly confident, fully prepared to speak multiple languages as smoothly as a symphony. And I knew Samantha was watching from the side, probably ready to roll her eyes at my over-the-top theatrics. Except, as the morning unfolded, something unexpected happened. I started with the usual small talk. English, polite, professional, but within minutes I'd switched to French for a group of executives from Paris, then Spanish for a few clients from Madrid, carefully using idioms and colloquial expressions I'd rehearsed endlessly. Finally, a Japanese client asked a nuanced question about a proposed marketing strategy. Without skipping a beat, I responded in flawless Japanese, carefully balancing formal honorifics with casual encouragement, so they would feel both respected and comfortable. The reactions were instantaneous. The French executives chuckled appreciatively, the Spanish group exchanged impressed glances, and the Japanese client leaned in, smiling. One of them, an older Frenchman with a kind, piercing gaze, nodded and said, "You are a genius. I have never seen anyone handle international clients with such ease and understanding." I swear I felt my chest swell in a way that had nothing to do with vanity. It was pride. Real, unfiltered, deserved pride. The walls of self-doubt I had carried around for years, mostly because of Samantha's teasing, crumbled in that moment. And then I looked at her. Samantha, who had always found my passion embarrassing, was frozen, her mouth slightly open, her arms crossed, but not in her usual teasing way. She was impressed. She couldn't hide it. And for a split second, I realized she might have been wrong all along, or at least I had been right to trust myself. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Clients approached me individually to thank me, shake my hand, and in some cases, ask me to mentor others on cross-cultural communication. My colleagues, who had once whispered doubts and chuckled at my eccentric habits, began to acknowledge my skills openly. Marcus, bless him, came over with a sheepish grin. "Okay, man, I get it now. That was actually amazing." I smiled, nodding. "Glad you finally noticed." Even my manager, who rarely handed out compliments without a spreadsheet full of performance metrics, came by with a firm handshake and a rare smile. "You handled yourself brilliantly. We'll be moving forward with you on more international accounts immediately. Consider this a promotion in scope." Promotion, recognition, validation. The words felt good on my tongue, but even better in my chest. Later, during a video call with a major client who had previously seemed skeptical of our proposals, I was able to resolve a misunderstanding in their native language. It was subtle, nuanced, and perfectly timed. One phrase in Spanish here, a polite correction in French there, a cultural nod in Japanese, and suddenly, what could have been a disaster transformed into a deal sealed with laughter and mutual respect. Samantha was there that entire time, quietly observing. At one point, she reached out and touched my arm, almost shyly. You are incredible," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I didn't expect that." I chuckled softly, a hint of triumph in my tone. "And that's exactly why I don't hide it anymore." She laughed, a little embarrassed herself, and I could see the respect in her eyes. Not just for my languages, but for the fact that I had quietly, consistently cultivated a skill she had always dismissed. That night, when we walked home through the city streets glittering with lights, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't just about impressing clients or earning praise. It was about realizing that being true to yourself, even if others mock you, has real power. Your quirks, your passions, your embarrassing habits, they can become your superpowers. Samantha held my hand, a small smile tugging at her lips. I guess I underestimated you, she said softly. And that's fine, I said, feeling a newfound confidence in my voice. But just so you know, I won't be shrinking myself anymore. Not for anyone. She laughed, squeezing my hand. Fair enough. But you'll forgive me if I tease you occasionally? Of course, I said, grinning. But now you'll have to be careful. You never know when my languages will save the day. And that was the thing. Being embarrassing had become my secret weapon. The very quirks that had made me self-conscious were now my strengths, my ticket to respect, recognition, and even a little bit of awe. As we reached our apartment, I glanced back at the city lights. Somewhere in those skyscrapers, clients were talking about me, colleagues were reconsidering their opinions, and I was finally seeing myself clearly. Competent, confident, and unapologetically me. I smiled, thinking about all the times I had bowed to Momo, greeted waiters in French, or whispered Japanese phrases to myself while brushing my teeth. Funny how the world once thought it was embarrassing, but now it was extraordinary. And I realized with perfect clarity that embracing your unique skills, even if they seem strange to others, isn't just rewarding, it's transformative. So yeah, call me dramatic, call me weird, call me embarrassing if you want. I've learned something important. The very things that make you different can also make you indispensable. And as I closed the door behind us, I whispered to myself, half in amusement, half in triumph. Turns out, embarrassing isn't a flaw. It's a secret superpower. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.